All right, Kennedy MP Bob Katter has hit back at a Senate inquiry which recommends banning cash payments over $10,000. Katter has raised concerns over the big banks' control when it comes to Australia's cash spendings, dubbing the banks as the new age of Big Brother. This is what he had to say earlier.
The banks are controlling your money from now on. Coronavirus plus restrictions on cash bill, this legislation that's going through, equals Big Brother.
The bill is likely to pass the Senate next sitting week. Joining me now with more is the man himself, Bob Katter, here in Brisbane. Bob, this is a threat to consumers. You can look at me, Bob.
You own the money. It's your money, right? So if you've got $10,000 in gold, and I had...
Is that 10,000 worth of gold?
20,000. Yeah.
20,000 worth of gold just there?
Yeah, just, you can hold it in one hand just like that, you know. But that's most of the $20,000 there. But a lot of people are investing in gold, and that is much better than pumping up inflationary pressure on the housing market and on the stock market. Infinitely better. But they're not allowed to do that anymore. I mean, $10,000 is, you know, a pittance really in the scheme of things. But it's not gold. You must understand that from now on, you are not allowed to use your money as legal tender if the amount is over $10,000. So if you own a couple of trucks and you're doing a general transport around Brisbane, that's your fuel for the week, right? Now, you're not allowed to pay for it yourself. You've got to get permission off the bank. Now, coronavirus has brought out in flashing neon lights what's happening here. People have rung up their banks wanting to take money out from the bank or another financial institution owned by the bank, and they've been told, oh, the computers are down. Now, the particular bank in question, and I haven't got the cutting, but I held it up today, the cutting from the Fin Review, quoting the cases. Now, the bank's computer was down until the article went in the Fin Review, and then the computer suddenly started working. After a week of not working, it suddenly started to work. The point is, if the bank doesn't want to give you the money, they get the control anymore. You can't put it in gold and or you know, paper money and have it yourself. No, that's not allowed anymore. Only the banks are allowed to use your money. Only the banks are allowed to authorise you. I'll rephrase that. Only the banks are allowed to authorise you to use your own money. Wow. Only the banks have the power. Now, you know, it took me a while to get my head around this, but what brought it home was when these people tried to get money out of the banks, they weren't allowed to.
Bob,
so how do we fuel our little general transport truck around Brisbane or Cunnamulla?
It's a big issue. This coronavirus is a worry. I mean, there's a run on toilet paper, and it's almost as if the public are panicking. How do you think Morrison's handling it?
I don't think there's a lot that the Prime Minister can do about it, except to reverse all the chickens are coming home to roost now. You know, almost everything that we spend money on comes from overseas. Almost everything. Our petrol, our motor cars, our appliances, household appliances, our clothing. I mean, everything's made in Australia that I wear, but all the cloth and all the leather and all the felt comes from overseas. So, I mean, but now you can't get it from overseas. So now you will pay the price of having destroyed every industry in this country. We can't produce anything now except iron ore, coal, and we're not a mining country. When you mine it, you take it out of the ground, sell the metal. We take it out of the ground, sell the ground. That's quarrying. That's not mining. So we're a quarrying country. That's all we can sell is quarrying material. That's what we're down to. And your free market, brainless, imbecilic policies have led us to a situation where most of our fruit and vegetables come from overseas. We are a net importer of fruit and vegetables. I find this very hard to believe. Those are the ABS figures, not mine. It was the Fin Review, Australian Financial Review today, that said people are being told by the banks they can't have their money. Coronavirus has brought out just the serious implications of this. And it says, no the bill itself is rejection of cash. Well, hold on a minute. That's my money. You're still saying I can't use legal tender anymore. I mean, someone better tell the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition about a bloke called Bligh. He hid under the bed when he tried to take our legal tender off us.
What about Barilaro heading off to see Berejiklian and talk about nuclear as an option? Do you think nuclear is an option?
One gets sick and tired, particularly the National Party. They've announced 23 dams in Queensland. They've burnt up nearly $1,000 million, and they haven't even got an engineering plan. Don't talk about it, do it. It is a bloody good idea. And we happen to have 52% of this country is desert. So put it in the centre of the desert, it can't ever hurt anyone, right? There were some tribes living there, but the areas that I'm talking about, there are no tribes living there now. So even if everything was to go bad, and as you pointed out in France, I mean, right in the centre of one of the most densely populated parts of the world, they're doing it. In Japan, one of the most densely populated parts of the world. And yeah, there's some old technology, but the newer technology. And Bill Heffernan used to be number 2 in the Howard government. He rang me about thorium, which is uranium, but much more safe. And I think it should be seriously looked at. I think he's right.
Thorium. Now, since we've had those terrible weather events up in the north, insurances have gone up by 30% in Townsville. Now, my in-laws, they live in Bowen, since Cyclone Debbie, $2,000 to insure their home. What do we say to these insurance companies when, I mean, essentially they're going without insurance now, a lot of people in North Queensland?
No, that's correct. That is correct. And the government will have to, when the next cyclone comes in, and we've had 3 very serious cyclones in the last 12 years now, Larry, Debbie, and, the other one is terrible. But when the next one comes through, the government will have to pick up... Yasi. The government will have to pick up the debt because these people don't have insurance anymore. If you're a pensioner, the cost of electricity has gone from $670 to $2,500. The cost of your insurance has gone up to $2,500 on average for North Queenslanders. They can't afford to pay it, so they're not paying it. So if it occurs, the government will. So why doesn't the government... What happened last time, and this was in the 1920s after the huge cyclone wiped out Innisfail and part of Cairns, the then Theodore government introduced the State Government Insurance Office. Said, all right, well, if you're not going to insure them, well, we'll insure them. And we'll make a big quid out of it. The State Government Insurance Office will make a lot of money out of it, which they did. For a period of the next 50 or 60 years, they made a lot of money out of it. But we had fair insurance. All the houses that have gone... that are goable have gone. I mean, after a series of cyclones, everything's been destroyed, except, and the post-cyclone Tracy building codes are excellent. I mean, in Innisfail, you can just draw a line straight through the town. The old part of town, gone completely. New part of town, untouched.
Bob, before we go, if there's a hung parliament in Queensland on October 31, will you back Labor or will you back the LNP?
We will back the people that give us the deals that we want for North Queensland. Almost all of our members will come out of North Queensland, and we will back that deal. And what Queensland will get, not just North Queensland, they'll get a rail line into the Galilee, opening up the Galilee and doubling our coal production. And the lily pads can yell and scream and rent their garments, but that's what's going to happen. And secondly, we will build Hell's Gates. Now, I hate to say it, but the Greenies will love us for this because we'll produce all of North Queensland's power with zero emissions. The CO2 emissions from the giant power station, that's part of the Hell's Gate deal, it has zero emissions. They're not emissions. They are not a byproduct. They are the product. We want to produce as much CO2 as we possibly can to feed to algae. Now, Mike Kelly, 183 years dairy farming down in Eden, Monero, he's a member of Parliament. He's just come back from Israel. He said, mate, this new technology, so we're already into it, mate. We've already drawn up the plans for algae ponds. And you feed CO2 in the algae ponds, air,
there you go,
water, algae, and we've got ourselves cattle feed or biodiesel.
Bob, I might grab a security bloke to take you out. He's got about 20,000 worth of gold on him. But thanks
It is 20,000.
Thanks very much for joining us tonight, Bob.
God bless all the listeners.